They told her to leave. She said she didn't belong. What they didn't know? She was the CEO, and this was her bank. 2 hours later, her legal team walked in, and everything changed. It all started with a stare. Dr. Angela Watkins stepped into the grand lobby of Heritage Community Bank like she owned the place. Because, technically, she did. The marble floors gleamed beneath her heels as the echo of each step bounced through the tall atrium. Her tailored gray suit hugged her frame like armor, a symbol of decades of battles won in boardrooms and back offices. Her dark leather briefcase, initialed AW in gold, swung confidently at her side. She had just returned from a 2-month trip negotiating the bank's largest acquisition to date. Billions of dollars were on the table, and she had handled it flawlessly. Today, she came unannounced, wanting to visit one of the flagship branches to see the day-to-day culture for herself. No fanfare, no press, just eyes and instinct. But as soon as she approached the front desk, something shifted. The young receptionist, polished, polite, and clearly new, offered a hesitant smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, uncertain. And then, like a switch being flipped, her demeanor stiffened. Her eyes moved down to Angela's skin, her hair, and her tailored yet simple attire. "Ma'am," the receptionist said, voice clipped and rehearsed. "Customers are not allowed behind the counter. Please step aside." Angela paused, her expression unreadable. She wasn't angry, not yet, just curious. She had built Heritage Community Bank to be inclusive, progressive, and rooted in respect. But this subtle dismissal, told her something was broken. "I'm not a customer," she replied, her voice calm but firm. Before the receptionist could respond, a tall man in a navy blue suit appeared beside her. He walked with the self-importance of someone who thought a nice watch made him important. His badge read, Gerald Knox, Acting Branch Manager. He barely glanced at Angela before stepping forward like a bouncer at an exclusive club. "I'm the acting branch manager here," he said briskly, folding his arms. "And I don't care what you think you are. You're disrupting business and don't have clearance to be behind the desk." Angela tilted her head slightly. She wasn't behind any desk. She was standing on the same side as every other customer in line. "I'm simply observing," she said. But Gerald was already done listening. "You have 5 minutes to leave," he barked, pointing toward the door, "or I'll have you escorted out." A security guard in the back straightened. A couple of tellers glanced up from their screens. The room didn't go silent, but the air certainly changed. Angela looked down at her watch, not in submission, but in calculation. She gave a soft, knowing chuckle. 5 minutes? She repeated. More than enough. That line didn't come from pride. It came from preparation. Angela Watkins didn't need to prove herself to anyone. She didn't need to yell, or flash a badge, or shout her title across the marble floor. Instead, she calmly pulled out her phone, stepped aside to one of the lounge chairs, and tapped the screen 3 times. No panic, no drama, just protocol. Her staff knew what to do. While Gerald smirked and strutted back to his office, likely congratulating himself on handling the situation, Angela sat with grace, her fingers still scrolling through emails, already reviewing staff rosters and performance reports for the branch. What Gerald didn't realize, and what he was about to learn the hard way, was that the woman he had just tried to humiliate wasn't some entitled guest. She was the CEO, the founder, the woman whose vision had built this bank from a single community office to a national powerhouse. And now, because of this moment, everything about how this branch operated, from its leadership to its hiring policies, was about to change. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard. Because when power walks in wearing a quiet smile, it doesn't beg for recognition. It simply watches and waits for its 5 minutes to be up. What the staff didn't know, or perhaps chose not to acknowledge, was that Dr. Angela Watkins wasn't just another woman in a sharp suit and heels. She wasn't some upscale customer with an attitude or a regional auditor doing a pop-in. No, Angela was the reason they had a branch to work in. She was the mind, the muscle, and the spirit behind the very bank whose name shined in gold behind the marble counter. Heritage Financial Group was her creation, born from her years of relentless work, strategic brilliance, and an unshakable vision to build something better than what the financial world had allowed people like her to believe was possible. Starting from a cramped office in downtown Atlanta with just one assistant, Angela had fought tooth and nail against systemic barriers, dismissive investors, and competitors who laughed behind her back. Today, she oversaw a company with over 200 branches, a multi-billion-dollar portfolio, and a reputation for community-centered banking. But as she stood there being sized up by undertrained staff, none of that mattered, because despite everything she had built, everything she had become, they only saw a black woman standing alone with a briefcase. They didn't see the Harvard Business School degree hanging in her office, signed, framed, and surrounded by letters of recommendation from names they would probably gasp at. They didn't see the industry awards she had won, Most Influential Woman in Finance, CEO of the Year, and Trailblazer of Banking Equality. They didn't see the thousands of jobs she had created, the scholarships she personally funded for underprivileged youth, or the way her name had become a case study in business schools across the country. No, what they did see was what they chose to focus on: her skin, her silence, her refusal to throw her weight around the moment she was disrespected. Angela had always known that walking into rooms where people didn't expect someone like her to lead came with challenges. She'd grown up being the only one in AP classes, the first in internships, the exception in every boardroom. She had built thick skin, sharper instincts, and the power to turn an insult into fuel. But today was something different. Because being judged by strangers was one thing, but being kicked out of her own bank, disrespected by people operating under her name and her policies, was a gut punch even she hadn't anticipated. Angela didn't shout. She didn't argue. She didn't whip out her business card or demand an apology. That wasn't her style. Power, after all, doesn't panic. It plans. And Angela had a long memory and a short tolerance for mediocrity. She stepped aside from the counter with the quiet grace of someone who had been underestimated before and used it to her advantage every single time. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. One tap opened her private contacts. Another tap connected her to her chief legal officer. "We have a situation," she said plainly. No emotion, no anger, just a fact. As her eyes scanned the lobby, she wasn't just seeing walls and windows. She was mentally mapping out every nameplate, every policy violation, and every face that would soon have to answer for their actions. Gerald Knox, the arrogant acting manager, had no idea that in trying to flex his temporary authority, he had just invited an audit, a review, and a full HR investigation. Angela wasn't interested in revenge. She was interested in standards. And if this branch had forgotten who set those standards, she was about to remind them, in the most unforgettable way. 2 hours after her quiet exit, the once peaceful marble lobby of Heritage Bank transformed into a pressure cooker of whispers and sideways glances. Outside, the sudden screech of tires brought curious eyes to the massive glass doors. 3 black SUVs pulled up like a presidential motorcade, their tinted windows hiding the storm about to enter. Out stepped 4 lawyers, each dressed in sleek, tailored suits and moving with a precision that said they didn't come to chat. In their hands were thick leather folders, stuffed with contracts, policies, and something far more dangerous: authority. Behind them, the final figure emerged. Tall, poised, and commanding. Red heels clicked sharply against the marble, matching her bold lipstick, and a confidence that didn't need announcing. She wore dark sunglasses like a shield, her face unreadable, but unmistakable. It was Dr. Angela Watkins. This time, she didn't walk in alone. This time, she came not as a visitor, not even just as a CEO, but as a force. And this time, no one, not even security, dared to stop her. The guards recognized her now. The receptionist who had brushed her off earlier went pale, her hand frozen above the keyboard. The air in the room thickened. Everyone knew something big was about to happen. They just didn't know how big. From the far end of the lobby, Gerald Knox, the acting branch manager, noticed the commotion. Still riding high from his earlier smugness, he strutted over with the swagger of someone who believed they were in control. "Excuse me," he barked, trying to project authority. "You again? I thought we made it clear." He stopped mid-sentence as one of the attorneys stepped forward and handed him an envelope. It was heavy, sealed in gold foil, and embossed with the Heritage Financial Group crest. Gerald's eyes scanned the first few lines, and the blood slowly drained from his face. What is this?" he muttered. The lead attorney replied, voice smooth but firm. "This branch is now under executive review. Immediate compliance is expected. You are no longer authorized to access any system, file, or client record until instructed otherwise." Murmurs echoed from nearby desks. Tellers peeked out. Employees began whispering. Angela took a deliberate step forward, removing her sunglasses and locking eyes with Gerald. Her tone was measured but razor sharp. "Let me make this clear," she said. "You're standing in my building, sitting in my chair, drinking my coffee." Gerald stammered, trying to explain, but Angela continued, unbothered. "And now I'm deciding whether or not you deserve to stay in my company." Gerald opened his mouth to speak, but couldn't find the words. Behind him, staff began to back away from their stations, unsure what to do or say. The calm, calculated arrival of Angela's legal team wasn't just a power move. It was a message. No yelling, no chaos, just control. Absolute control. One of the attorneys quietly began gathering employee names and statements. Another connected a secure laptop to the branch server to begin data auditing. Angela, meanwhile, simply observed. She looked around at the branch she had once been so proud of, where the culture was supposed to be inclusive, respectful, and forward-thinking. But today, it had failed that vision. Failed her. She wasn't here to humiliate anyone. She was here to restore standards. "This isn't just about me," she finally said, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. This is about how you treat every person who walks through that door, whether they're a millionaire or a single mother, whether they're wearing Armani or overalls. Her voice was calm, but each word struck like thunder. This bank was built on trust, dignity, and community. If you can't see people beyond your own bias, you don't belong here. By the end of the day, Gerald had been escorted out. And Heritage Bank? It would never be the same again. Word spread like wildfire, fast, hot, and impossible to contain. Within minutes of Angela Watkins walking back into the branch with her legal team, the entire office seemed to freeze in time. From behind frosted glass panels, employees peeked out nervously as whispers rippled through the halls like static electricity. The woman they had brushed off as a mere customer now moved through the building with the confident stride of someone who didn't need to explain herself. Because suddenly, everyone knew. Angela's calm, quiet demeanor contrasted with the chaos unfolding around her. Desktops were locked, phones silenced, and side conversations halted. Some employees stood frozen in place. Others slowly backed away from the drama, trying not to get caught in the fallout. No one dared interrupt as Angela and her team accessed internal systems, opened drawers, and reviewed client protocols. Behind the scenes, the corporate office had authorized everything. Angela's surprise visit, originally meant to be a quiet culture check, had turned into a full-scale audit. And this branch? It hadn't just failed her test, it had violated everything she built this company to stand for. The truth, as it turned out, was uglier than even Angela had imagined. Security footage was pulled and reviewed, showing not just one moment of disrespect, but several instances where customers had been subtly profiled or dismissed. Internal emails revealed a pattern of negligence, missed compliance steps, unauthorized process shortcuts, and a tone from management that bred exclusion instead of excellence. Gerald Knox, the acting branch manager who had tried to kick Angela out, was never supposed to be in that position unsupervised. He was on temporary assignment from another region and hadn't even completed his mandatory diversity and leadership training. Worse still, he had a prior warning in his file for inappropriate conduct toward a colleague. When confronted by Angela's team, he fumbled to shift blame. "I didn't know who she was," he stammered, glancing around. "She never introduced herself. She didn't look like..." His words trailed off, realizing how damning they sounded. "Didn't look like a CEO?" One of the attorneys finished for him, eyebrow raised. The room went quiet, because no matter how Gerald tried to spin it, the fact remained. Angela hadn't needed to introduce herself. Her name was literally etched into a gold plaque in the front lobby. Beneath the words, founder and CEO, Dr. Angela Watkins. The same plaque he'd walked past every single morning without a glance. That afternoon, Angela stood before the entire staff in the main lobby, her presence calm but commanding. The room was silent, every desk empty, every employee present, and every eye fixed on her. She didn't bring a script. She didn't need one. Her voice was low, but it carried like a gavel striking hardwood. "This company," she began, "was built to serve everyone, with dignity, with respect, and with integrity." She let the silence hang before continuing. "Not just the ones who come in wearing suits, not just the ones who speak a certain way. Everyone." She paused, scanning the room. Some employees looked ashamed, others looked stunned. A few looked like they finally understood something they should have known all along. Angela continued, "If you can't live by that standard, if you can't check your judgment, your bias, and your assumptions at the door, you are in the wrong building." Her words didn't need theatrics. They were clean, powerful, and direct. In that moment, she wasn't just addressing one branch. She was resetting the entire culture of her institution, not with a press release, not with a memo, but by walking in, being dismissed, and choosing to lead anyway. Not louder, just stronger. And that was the legacy she demanded everyone rise to meet. By the time the sun began to set over the sleek glass facade of Heritage Community Bank, the building felt like an entirely different place. Gone was the smug confidence of Gerald Knox, the acting branch manager who had so proudly dismissed Angela just hours earlier. His desk sat empty now. After a quiet but firm meeting in the back conference room, Gerald was escorted out by internal security. No drama, no raised voices, just a single box of belongings and a face drained of color. He hadn't been fired, yet, but he was placed under full review by the board of directors, pending further investigation. The receptionist, young and likely acting more out of learned behavior than ill intent, was placed on administrative leave with a clear message. Actions have consequences, but so do environments that enable those actions. Angela believed in accountability, but she also believed in growth. And that's why, before leaving the branch, she signed an executive order right there in the building. Mandatory retraining for every single employee across the company, from tellers to senior vice presidents. Not just a rushed seminar or a checkbox webinar. This was a full-scale, interactive retraining initiative focused on empathy, perception, unconscious bias, and how professionalism is measured not by appearance, but by performance, respect, and integrity. This wasn't just a slap on the wrist or a PR move. Angela had no interest in press headlines or saving face. She wanted transformation, because this wasn't the first time someone in power had assumed she didn't belong. It was simply the most public. "We don't just have a policy problem," she told her leadership team that night. "We have a perception problem." And she was right. For all the progress made in boardrooms, banks, and Fortune 500 companies, it still only took one glance, one snap judgment, for people to forget what true leadership looked like. It wasn't in the suit or the title. It wasn't in the car you drove or the color of your lipstick. It was in how you carried yourself. And Angela had carried herself like a storm wrapped in stillness. Her response wasn't to shout or rage. It was to restructure, to educate, and to hold up a mirror to her entire organization. From that day on, every heritage branch across the nation would operate with a renewed sense of purpose. Training modules included real stories from real clients and employees who had been dismissed, overlooked, or profiled. Discussions were led by people of color, women, and disabled professionals, those whose journeys were often invisible to those in privilege. The curriculum didn't just challenge behavior, it challenged beliefs. And what about Angela herself? She didn't return to the branch with vengeance. She returned with vision. She could have fired the entire team on the spot. She had the legal right, the moral right. But she didn't, because power doesn't always punish, it teaches. Angela believed in second chances, in growth, and in calling people in, not just calling them out. She had once been a young black woman in a white-collar world that didn't expect her to succeed. She remembered the way doors were closed before she even knocked. So instead of shutting doors, she opened them wider, but with firmer expectations. Before leaving the branch that evening, she called an all-staff meeting. No podium, no script, just her. She looked each person in the eye, not with judgment, but with clarity. "You may not have recognized me earlier," she said, a quiet smile curving her lips. "But from this moment on, you'll know exactly who runs this bank." There was no applause, just silence. The kind that comes when people realize they've witnessed something they'll never forget. Not a takedown, a lesson, a redirection of culture, and most importantly, a reminder of what leadership truly looks like. By the weekend, the story had spread like wildfire online. Someone had posted a clip from the branch's security footage, Angela walking in surrounded by her legal team, Gerald frozen in place as she delivered her now iconic line. The caption read, "This is how a real CEO handles disrespect." The video gained traction in hours, shared by celebrities, financial gurus, and working-class people who knew too well the pain of being underestimated. Hashtags like #respect, her title, and #CEO. Angela trended for days. Media outlets scrambled to get interviews. Editorials praised her restraint, her strategy, and her leadership. But Angela didn't chase the attention. She gave one short interview where she said simply, "This wasn't about going viral, it was about going forward. This is what forward looks like." In that moment, she became more than a CEO. She became a symbol. Not for being flawless, but for showing the world that real power doesn't panic. Real power walks into a room, sees everything, says little, and makes permanent change in silence. The kind of change that doesn't need applause, it just needs results. In the months that followed, Heritage Financial Group saw an internal transformation like never before. Turnover dropped, employee satisfaction soared. Recruitment became more inclusive, and branches across the country reported increased customer trust and retention. Angela's quiet stand had shaken the very bones of corporate culture, not with outrage, but with structure. And to think, it all started with a stare. A woman walking into her own building, mistaken for someone who didn't belong, and deciding not to react with anger, but with action. She hadn't needed to prove herself, she was the proof. And that was the legacy she wanted her staff and the world to remember. That when you're judged for your skin, your gender, your silence, or your stride, you don't shrink, you don't yell, you stand tall, you do the work, and when the moment is right, you take back what's already yours. And that's exactly what Angela Watkins did. Never underestimate someone just because they don't look the part. Because one day, the person you try to humiliate might be the one holding your future in their hands. If you liked this story, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment below.